when is the right time to leave is usually an internal question that you ask yourself. Is the job no longer fulfilling you? What does that mean? Most of the time, people want to continue to grow. They want to continue to learn. And so if you're no longer learning, then definitely it's time for you to leave. The second one, I think, is important around not only that you're not learning, but also the environment that you're in. Are you in a culture that is supportive of you, that appreciates you, that values your contribution? And I think if those two things don't exist anymore, then it's probably time for you to think about what else there might be. Today's episode is a little different. Usually I'm the one asking the questions, digging into midlife transitions, career pivots, and how to align life with what actually matters. But today I'm switching things up. Instead of me running the show, my wife, Sienna Farris, is taking over and putting me in the hot seat. Now, let's be real. Coaching your spouse is not the same as coaching a client. When your partner asks you a question, there's a whole different dynamic at play. But Sienna got some great ones lined up for us about midlife transitions, and I'm excited and maybe a little nervous to dive in about Sienna. She's a marketing powerhouse with 20 plus years of experience across industries like publishing, beauty, and entertainment. She worked on major campaigns, building partnerships, and shaped digital strategies for names like Simon Schuster and Estee Lauder. On top of all of that, she's an incredible storyteller and a damn good writer. Sienna, thank you for jumping on today and interviewing me.
Thank you for having me, considering I feel like I had to beg you a little bit to get on, but now I feel excited about this. So this is my question. This is, as you know, I made a pivot to leave my last job, and I feel very good about that pivot. But there comes a time where the excitement of making a big change, it wears off a little bit, and you start thinking and start having a little bit of anxiety about what comes next. And you start doubting yourself and maybe wondering whether I made the right decision, even though you know you made the right decision. What should you put in place to make sure that that's the right decision, that you're not making a rash decision? Like it's great having a career coach in your home, and also not so great. And I feel like a lot of times you believed in me more than I would believe in myself, which is, another story, but also just like how often women can operate, just being frank, we deal with a lot of imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I think one of the more important things is that you need to make sure that you know that you're going to be fine financially, right? You don't want to jump ship when you have 2 months in the bank, and then the pressure is on for you to find a job within 2 months, which is very difficult to do, or I think in this environment actually impossible to do. So if you have a financial advisor, make sure you sit down with your financial advisor and your spouse so that collectively you have an understanding of what your financial situation is and how long in the worst case scenario you could afford to not have a job.
I think one of the most valuable pieces of advice that you gave me is when I did decide to make this pivot, that you told me to rest, to not do anything. And that was really hard for me. As you know, like the week after I left my job, I spent like a whole week in a conference, and I was there like morning to night and writing down all information, and I need to keep myself up to speed. And you're like, what are you doing? Like, you need to take a step back and figure out what you want to do and really take the quiet time to rest. From a rest standpoint, since a lot of people are uncomfortable with that, what are some ways to direct your time during that to make you feel like you are doing something fruitful, still quieting the mind, but helping you figure out what's next?
Yeah, this time is not about being productive, right? So I think that's the misconception that people have. And of course, you have this underlying anxiety that you want to get a job. So if you've gone through the financial analysis and you understand how much time you have, then you can allocate a very specific time where you don't do anything, because we don't even know how much stress we hold in our bodies until we don't have it. So I remember when I had time in between jobs the first time, and I took, I think, 3 or 4 months of not doing anything. It took me at least, I think, a month, if not more, to fully feel relaxed and understanding what that feeling actually is when you don't have stress. I was under so much stress all the time that we don't even know what that feels like. So I think that that's a very important part. So it's not about keeping yourself busy. I found what was helpful was that I did still want to structure my day in doing things that were non-work related. So I decided that I was going to learn how to play the piano, did my exercise every day. I did my meditation practice. So I did have a scheduled day, but I scheduled it with things that gave me joy. And I think that that's very important for people to do. So everyone's joy will be different, but do structure your day, because you don't want to be sitting on the couch watching Netflix all day. That actually will
What are
be.
you saying? I have not been sitting on the couch watching Netflix. I've been doing things.
Is Love is Blind on Netflix?
Yes, but that's not during the workday. That's not during the workday. That's like a little, like a treat at the end of the day. But yes. Yes, you're right. It is about taking that time, finding the things that you've always wanted to do. I feel like it just took me a long time to uncouple myself from that rat race or feeling busy. Like I feel like I finally got into the groove, but I'm now at the point where I need to like really focus on, finding a new job. But I really did have to sit in this idea of like, this is all just about me and what I want to do and direct myself in that self-care. And I do feel lucky that I do have a supportive partner.
Yeah, I think that's it's important that you take that time, because so much of our identity is tied to our work. And as you said, once you decouple yourself, it actually takes some time, because you don't even know who you are until you actually don't work anymore. Most of our validation comes through our work, and that's external validation. And really what we need to work on is to switch from external validation to internal validation. So you are a valuable human being, not because of the work that you do. You're a valuable human being because you're a valuable human being. And that decoupling really is very difficult, because we associate so much of ourselves with the work that we do.
That is so true. I do feel taking this time has been one of the biggest blessings because I am really figuring out who I am. I felt like I had this pretty strong sense of self. I work for a publishing company. I'm a mom. I have, a husband, and I'm really taking this time to figure out who I want to be. And I'm really leaning into a lot of my creativity, which I didn't really have that space for. And you always say to me, rather than thinking about the job, rather than thinking about the industry, rather than thinking about exactly what you want to do, think about how you want to feel at that next experience. And a lot of times I'm like, well, what does that mean? Like, how do I feel?
Yeah, that's very common. And, it was the same for me too. I didn't even know how I felt at work, because I was just like, go, 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 and doing the next thing and making more money and getting another title. And when you reflect on that, and the exercise that I have my clients do is actually to go through their calendar and label the activities that they are doing or that they have done, if they've left a job, and label them between where they get energy from and what draws their energy. And so for me, the biggest draw of energy was these big Zoom meetings where there's tons of people on it, where I had to pay attention, because of course there are certain times where I had to contribute, but most of the time it was irrelevant to me. And it was just such a drain, right? So that's an example of what drains your energy. Where I got a lot of energy from was actually collaborating in teams, where I was working with a team. What I also really loved doing was to imagine the future and innovate. And third, what was important for me was to help people. And these are all things that really give me energy. And that's how I feel, right? When I feel excited when I do those things, and I can do those things almost all the time, and I don't get tired doing them. You get tired of the things that really drain your energy. And that's sort of, I think, a good way to put that in place for people to think about, how they feel in their workplace.
I really like that, and I like that framework to think about how you feel. I think as I'm exploring this, like obviously collaborating makes me feel really good. Working on a project, working on a creative project, just trying to find the companies that align with your values. I feel like so much in our culture is go, 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 right?
I think what's important is that you have to write down what your values are. So what are your core values? And then also, what are your non-negotiables, right? These are the things that you're not going to accept doing. And then based on that, then you can look at what kind of cultures you would be interested in. So that helps you from a cultural standpoint. But you also want to look at what kind of industries or what kind of sectors you really enjoy working on. But
Yeah.
I think even more important, or no, equally important, is for you to identify what industries are going to be growing where you actually can be successful in. And then once you've identified what these are, then you can triangulate that with the culture that you want to see. And lastly, what you want to look at is, what are your skills? And take an inventory of all the skills that you have. And of those skills, a lot of them will be, specifically for people in midlife, right, will be actually transferable skills, but they are actually applied to many other industries.
I feel like I have a large network. I'm in touch with that network, but I hate being a person that asks people for things. Like I don't want to come across as transactional. I don't want to be like, "Hey, I'm looking for a job, talk to me." The advice that you gave me was just about one, just having conversations with people you like or people you haven't gotten in touch with. And two, when you're talking to them, besides just listening and genuinely being interested in what they have to say, also think about how you can help that person. Like, what can you bring to the table? So I think I went from not enjoying networking to really enjoying networking. One of the best parts of this is that I can go up and I can meet with someone and I can have a coffee and I can meet them where they are and I'm not in a rush to get back. And I can really give my whole self and listen to what they're about, what they need, and then also think about how I can help them. And I feel like my networking sessions have been so much better, since I had that advice from you. So I just want to say thank you about that.
A lot of times when we have a job, we actually don't invest in relationships. And that's for many reasons actually not a good thing. So one, once you need a job, then you suddenly start reaching out to people. And then of course it is transactional because you're looking for a job. So it is important that when you have a job that you continuously network and build those kind of relationships. And what I tell my clients to do is to essentially segment their network, and you can do that with your LinkedIn, as a way to understand what your network is, into three segments. So the first segments are your friends. And friends I identify as people that I can text, and they'll text me back, and no questions asked, they will meet with me. The second category are people that are, on LinkedIn, because the many people you're connected with and you're like, I don't know who this person is. So those are the people that you know. And what you want to do there is you want to slowly cultivate those relationships to be able to move them into the friend bucket. You don't know who's going to become a friend, but you have to make the effort and reach out to them and have non-transactional interactions with them. Some people will be like, "Oh, I'd love to meet with you, Sienna, for a coffee," and you might even be surprised that they will, right? And then slowly you build up.
Everyone wants to have a coffee with me.
Of
So
course.
no, I'm just kidding. No, I hear you. Yes.
And then the last category are people that we want to meet either because we admire them or because we think they're influential or some reason, right? And those we actually have to use our friends to be able to be introduced to those kind of people and then do the same thing, cultivate them. I think a lot of times when people are out of a job, they don't want to meet with people that are also out of a job because they feel like, well, how can that person help me? And I actually think that's important to do that because A, it provides you with community. So you can commiserate around the process because it's a very lonely process to look for a job. And then B, also, you don't know who they know because their friends might not be able to help them with what they're looking for, but they might be able to help you with what you're looking for. So I think that's an important thing. And I know you've done that a couple of times.
Yes, I meet with the unemployed and the unemployed. I do not I do not discriminate. One thing that's been really helpful. It's funny. I know you often talk about this that you can suggest something to me. I'll say suggest. You can be very persistent in your suggesting. So you'll suggest something to me many times, and a lot of times I don't listen. But then someone else will talk to me about it, and then all of a sudden I will get on board. But one book that I'm so excited, and I feel like I'm just talking to anyone and everyone about it, is this book, Mind Magic, which is about manifestation. So you talked a lot during this conversation about how you want to feel when you have a new job, like what your intentions are, what you really want to do. And in the past, I was a little bit hesitant about manifestation because, you see everyone on TikTok and like people are using it in this like kind of woo-woo way, but not really thinking about the science behind it. And I just feel like that book has just been so groundbreaking for me in really being able to really hone in on what I want or how to clarify. Like you spend a lot of times like chasing, like, okay, I need this job or I need to be talking to this person, but just really being clear on what the next steps are. So can you talk to me a little bit about how to keep that going or how you might talk to someone who's in this process?
Yeah. Similar to for you, for me, most of manifestation was not very tangible and not science-based. So I didn't believe in it, even though actually I've always done it. And so the way I see it is that quite simply, really, right, is that you have to understand what you want. Because if you don't understand what you want, how are you going to go after it? And so most people don't actually know what they want, so they're just going after something. And that really usually is then just like, more money or a bigger title or more, and which is not really what truly we want. And so we want to identify that first. And that's a big part of my coaching process, helping people to understand what they want. The second part then is for them to be able to learn very specific habits, daily habits that they can implement that will get them to be that person that they want to be. And so that does two things for them. One, it actually gets you there because you're doing the things that you want to do or you need to do. And second, it also rewires your brain so that your brain believes that you actually are that person already. And then once you've done that, then your brain is the most powerful supercomputer there is, and it will then figure out what you need to do. And suddenly then you'll be able to see all these opportunities that you didn't see before. I think that most of the time we're too distracted.
Yes.
So that's why we actually don't see the signs and we can't really be creative because constantly we're occupying our mind. So we're on our phone, we're on Instagram, Facebook, and like how it goes is you go from one app to the other. And really what it is just that we're uncomfortable with our current situation and we want to disassociate. But this disassociation, distraction really doesn't enable us to be able to see all these opportunities. And so you first have to quiet your mind, and meditation is a very good way to do that. Similar to what we talked about in the beginning about when you're transitioning out of work, really what you have to do is quiet your mind and relax and really let your connect with yourself again. And then once you are able to do that, you're much more receptive to opportunities that otherwise you would have not been able to see.
I was trying to think about, I definitely want to lean into doing more creative work again. And, how am I able to afford that kind of lifestyle, knowing that we like live in New York and it's really expensive. And I know it sometimes we've talked about like, do we leave New York or do we make other like, concessions to make things, more affordable? This truck drives by and it says in these big letters, And it was like, you're still a New Yorker, even if you leave New York. Yes, it was an ad, right? It's for a moving company, but it really spoke to me. It just made me realize that you don't have to be attached to what you think you are. Like me just saying I'm a New Yorker and that's what I do and I have to live here and I have to work in that kind of space. I don't necessarily have to do that.
You bring up two, I think, very important concepts. So one is your perception or your understanding of yourself, and the other one is really about attachment. So the self is really a construct that we've created, so that you say to yourself, I'm a New Yorker, or I'm a good writer, or I'm not a writer, or I'm not creative, or I'm not athletic, or whatever we tell, all the stories that we tell ourselves. These are not real. It's just, it's just how we think about ourselves. And then we hold on to that so tightly, and that's the ego that's holding on to that. And so we do need to find a space to be able to let go of that, so that we can actually be open to all these opportunities that we could be. So that's the first part about the self, which I think is an important thing for people to think about. And then the other part about attachment is of expectations that we have. So if we're too attached to a specific expectation and make it too specific, then we're always going to be disappointed because things never going to turn out exactly the way we want it to. And so it's very important for us to learn how to be able to detach from those outcomes. So it's much more important to focus on the inputs than to focus on the outputs, because we can't really control the outputs. And once we're able to let go of those expectations, we actually have much more opportunity, because then also we'll be able to see what is out there, because most of the time we don't even know what it could be.
I do feel very lucky that I have this internal coach that's helping me through this. I've worked on championing other people's stories. I'm working on my own story, so I know that's really important. I've always loved reading and sharing books that are diverse stories but not steeped in trauma. I heard this funny language that someone used. They're like, I don't want to read something struggly, and I feel like people of color deserve to read and experience stories that can still be smart stories that distract themselves too. We want the thrillers, we want the romance, we want the little more of a commercial experience. It's more intelligent. So I feel like I'm leaning into how do I cultivate or work on those types of stories. So I feel like I'm getting closer to that. So I do feel like I'm clarifying it. It's just a matter of, I think it's also just like, you might have a passion in what you want to do. Is just how do you make sure that you can be successful in doing that and like make money. You still do have to pay the bills, especially when you're starting something new or trying to envision yourself into this new person. If you miss a day or you don't do something, you feel so bad about yourself, right? You like your inner critic comes out, and then you don't end up completing the task. You give up. But by congratulating yourself and saying something positive, even when you don't do it in that day, you then keep going. And so I feel like that was such a really great way of rewiring your brain and making yourself into what you're looking to do.
Yeah, I think that's also really very important. First of all, that you need to be kind to yourself, and then second, there's always an opportunity to start new. Right? So yeah, you were not able to write today, you can still write tomorrow. And I think that's also an important concept, that nothing is permanent.
You've been talking about that inner critic that tells you that it's too late to make a change, or you're too old, or that's never going to work. What are some of those tools to give yourself the confidence to know that you do have that power internally?
I think that's a very important question, because I think a lot of people go through that. So when you get older, your skill sets are much more about bringing things together, understanding bigger concepts, and your experience. So the kinds of jobs that we need to pivot to are the ones where we can utilize those skill sets. If it's just about production, right, like doing as much work as possible in a very short period of time, acting very quick and like working, tons of hours, that's just not going to, you're not going to be the best qualified person for that. And so you should not be applying for those kind of jobs. And I think that that's the hardest thing for people, is because they don't see themselves actually transforming, and they want to still do the same job that they used to do and make more money doing that. And I think that that's just in general an unrealistic expectation. So you do have to pivot, and you do have to reimagine who you are based on the skill sets that you now have that actually differentiate you in the market space, because a 20-year-old will not have your experience.
Yeah, I think that that's why it's just so important. And that is that when you're on this job search, it's all about relationships, and it's all about who you know and how you get in front of it. What advice do you have for someone to make sure that they still feel, positive?
You have to not get validation from the outside, but from the inside. So I think this is an opportunity for all of us to really look inside of who we truly are. And the strength comes from inside of you, right? You have to switch the narrative and really dig deep and looking in what you have to offer to the world. And there are actually still many amazing things that we have to offer to the world that go beyond, way beyond the things that we've done today. And we don't learn from our successes. We don't learn from when things are easy and when things are going well. We learn from the challenges that we have in life. And so that's why also it's important to not get down on yourself and saying, oh, this is so bad right now, I don't have a job, right? This is an opportunity for you to learn from that experience. And for a lot of us, it's very humbling actually not to have a job and to look for a job. And, maybe our entire career, we always had another job, and a better job. And so we get a little full of ourselves because we think that we're this, this amazing person, right? Which of course we are, but, it is through external validation. And then by not having a job, that often humbles us. And then that's an important experience that we have. So then when we do have a job again, we are much more humble and also much more empathetic to others who might not be in the same situation as we are. Well, I'm glad that you enjoyed the conversation. Hopefully you were able to take some things with you that usually you wouldn't be able to get from when we're sitting at a dinner table. But maybe we need to do this more frequently, just get on Zoom and have a more formal coaching session rather than doing it in between caring for our kid.
I mean, I like the dinner conversation part, but there is something about being in this, like, even though you're upstairs and I'm downstairs, and being this box, it does feel like it takes a lot of the, I don't know, like the pressure, like I think a lot of times what it is like, especially since you're coaching people all the time, it feels like sometimes that you're like criticizing or telling me what to do, right? And actually it's like really a lot of times the opposite. You're trying to push me to figure out what I want to do, right? But it's like difficult, it's different when it's your partner. And the way you're delivering it right now is very nice.
Well, thank you for asking me all these great questions and entertaining me in that process as well. Thank you, Sienna.
Bye.